Hi, and welcome to Paint Along in Watercolor with Sonia Mocnik. This is a very short video on a little vignette of a painting that I have set up for an introduction to my intermediate watercolor class that I will be starting again shortly. And this follows the same pattern that I do with all my intermediate classes, and it allows you to see the types of things that you can learn from me in this program. So the first thing we do, and I will just take this away here, is I usually have a template that I've set up for you that you can either use as your drawing on a 9x12 watercolor sheet, or I try and do also a smaller version of approximately 11 by 7.5, which is usually what the size of a 1/8 of a regular large sheet of watercolor paper is. And then with that, you get also a picture, the reference material that I have set up online, and it's in color. Right now you're seeing a black and white version of my picture that I took, and I will show you the color picture in just one moment. Just got to bring it up. So you will also get a picture of that to go along with the template. Also included in that, and here's our picture right here that I took when I was in Corfu. Along with these items, you also get a write-up that basically takes you step by step into the processes I take. This is including the colors that I use, the paper size which I just mentioned, my materials that I used along with that, and I'm just bringing up one of my other write-ups so that you could actually see what that entails. Let's bring that up for the last class that we had. And so what I try to do is give you the opportunity to read that ahead of time, and then feel comfortable when you're coming into the Zoom class so that you know what to expect. For example, this is one that I had for a write-up recently. I have the colors on the listing. I have the materials like tape and hairdryer and sponge and masking fluid needed. I have the different brushes that I use, and then I go through step by step, writing down the information, and usually I try to involve step-by-step pictures as well of my painting process. And not only do you see it on a write-up like this, but you will also see it on video. And I'll just bring that up one moment here. On YouTube, you will get a link to my video, and you will be able to actually see the process of what I will be teaching you during our class together. So let's bring up one particular video right now. This video that we're going to be doing together as a watercolor demonstration is about Mexico and these beautiful bikes and just the details in the walls that I found when I was there in Cozumel. And so we're going to work with trying to keep the whites, trying to get more of the shadows, and seeing how we can get those three bikes to really reflect that they have some depth in there. And so that's why I'm going to take you on the journey today, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. So from that video that you saw there, you saw me talking, but I then change and switch so that you just see what you're going to see in this demonstration as well. Okay, welcome again to our latest. And I'm going to be painting, and I go through step by step. I also write on the video a little bit of information to tie in with each of those steps. And then finally, when you're actually in the Zoom class, you're together with several other people, but you're in the comfort of your own home. You have access to talking to me, because normally a lot of the time it's like a web program where you can't actually ask anything except through a chat line. In my classes, you're there. I'll mute you if I'm going to be doing a lot of instruction and need time to keep everybody quiet, but in between we do get a chance to chat to each other, chat and ask me questions. If you're having a difficulty, I try and watch the reactions in the Zoom meetings and see if I pick up on, say, a person who gets frustrated or things like that, so that I can try and ask the question myself and allow them. And we try at the end of the class to actually show each other the work. There's also a Facebook page where you can put your pictures on the screen and ask me questions. But you can ask me anytime by email as well and send me a copy of your picture, a screenshot of the picture, and then I can help you with that too. And so those are all the different ways. Now we spend 2.5 hours for the session on Zoom. And these classes are 6 classes with 6 different actual subjects. And that allows you a week in between each class to really work on, or if you don't have time, to work on it afterwards, and you'll always have access to the video as well as all the other information. So for example, with the Zoom, I can show you just a quick picture here. So there's our group with Zoom, and we were just chatting about some of the things that we were doing. So you will have the opportunity to interact that way. We used to record the Zoom session as well, but that's a little bit more difficult. So we just stick to the YouTube that I create ahead of time. And that way you're not getting a lot of the feedback from the individual questions. I also then send you a copy of the final pictures that we created so that you can see finished results of the class and how everybody enjoyed the pictures, for example, like this, and thus you'll see how those are. So let's get into our class today. Now in this picture, what I was wanting to keep very simple but very lovely is the wonderful diagonals of the sidewalk or the granite pavement area. I love the fact that in this composition we have the statue as a focal point, and then you have into the distance another couple who's actually looking at some of the foliage and the gardens out there, which is a nice composition triangle style. We talk about compositions. We use pen and ink. We don't necessarily use pen and ink all the time. We use loose washes. We use different types of watercolor, and I will guide you along there. But again, one of the biggest things is to make sure you are comfortable with your own set of materials. I don't require any specific materials, but you can follow along based on what I use. If you have any questions about the type of paint that's being used or anything like that, you can certainly ask. There's no problem with that. So I'm just bringing back up my picture that I just had, and we'll get right into this. So in my painting here, I'm going to be using a little bit of my permanent rose, which I have here. I'm going to soften that up to make that a little bit more rust colored with a little bit of my cadmium yellow pale. And the rest of these grays and greens are going to come from a group of greens that I have here, one of which will be PERYLENE green. I have a Winsor Newton and a Daniel Smith. Both of these are PERYLENE, and I'll show you the differences in them. When you add permanent rose to them, or if you add a quin red to them, they will become like a lamp black, but we're going to stick to more of a grayish color. If I need to use any browns, I can mix in a little bit of these two, yellow and red, and I will be able to start getting an orange. I can add a little bit of a phthalo blue or a PERYLENE, and I will start to get a brown if I need to have any kind of things for the trunks and things like that. We're going to use a warm gray on our statue. As you can see here, it's quite lovely. And we won't do a lot of coloring on that. We're just going to fill in a little bit to give some of the shadows in there. So let's follow me along. So today I'm using a Da Vinci brush. I'm going to use this is a Cosmo Top Spin. It's a dagger, and I will be using that just for simplicity here. I often use Da Vinci brushes in different forms. I like my, I'm just trying to think of the word now. These are some of my favorite brushes here. These are the quills, and they're very traditional, but now instead of using a part of a feather's edge, they're now using plastic, which is fantastic, and the metal. And it allows for a lot of water in the top of the brush, and is a great way to paint with. And this is another beautiful Petit Gris. It has some real fur in it, which is, it absorbs a lot of water from that perspective. Whereas the Cosmo Top Spin that I have here is a synthetic brush. Okay, so let's get started. In this process, we're going to keep it nice and loose, and so a lot of times what I'll suggest using for that is a hake brush just to put water over the entire area. Now I ink this so that you can see it better, and also it's a nice way to not have to do a lot of painting on here, because with line and wash you focus on the lines of with the ink and then just throw in some watercolor. So I'm just going to wet all this up so that we can keep it nice and loose. And you do want to make sure that when you use an ink, you leave it on for a while to let dry, but you also make sure that it is waterproof, because otherwise that's another, it'll be a nice feature, but it will start to run and change your colors that you're using. All right, and I mentioned I was going to mix in a little bit of my permanent rose with my yellow to get a little bit of that orange. Here we go, right in here. We're just going to add in a little bit of that color right into the side here. Now it is darker, there's some shadows there, so I can just add a little bit of deeper color and pop that in. So it gives us a hint of that post that's behind there. Let's just put in a little bit more red, and there's some shadows just at the top here. And you see the shadows coming down to this area here. Now watercolor will dry 50% lighter than what you see when you put it down. So you can always watch for that perspective. Okay, now that we've done that, we're going to add in a little bit of the greens in the background before we go to the very darkest gray. So I mentioned that I was going to use PERYLENE green, but before I get to that green, I wanted to have a lighter, softer green here. And the easiest to use is the sap green, which I'm going to be using from Van Gogh, and I'm just going to pop in some nice sap green into my background colors. Now in Greece, it's gorgeous. Some are the pines and things, the cypresses are very cool in color and tone. And of course the skies are very lovely blue. So what's going to happen is I'm going to just drop in a little bit of phthalo blue in a moment here, once I've just dropped in finished the rest of this sap green. And again, I'm not doing anything special about this, I just want to get a nice little bit of color in here, and maybe add a little bit of color for the garden. Let's put in a little bit of yellow first for the garden, and then we'll get some greens in here in a minute. So I'm now going to take my phthalo blue and I'm going to do some cool shadows in here. As you can see, just by popping it in, I get some very nice cool color, and I can soften that up with a little bit of extra water here and bring that into some of the shadows that were behind here. I can also use a little bit of that phthalo blue and pop it into the sky. Now it looks a little bit green, so I'm just going to soften that up a bit. Get that away there, and maybe add a little bit more blue. My coloring has been mixed up a bit here, but we can make that happen. Here we go. So all I need to do is maybe drop in a bit more water, and we have a nice blue sky. All right, let's go back to where we had the colors kind of mixing in there, and you see some blossoms in there because of the wet. And what we're trying to do is just get some cooler color in here so we get some depth. And that'll help to give some depth to the actual gardens. Let's put a little bit on the right here. Now I can even add more to that by simply doing some PERYLENE green. And PERYLENE green is a very dark green, and I can just drop that in and it will bring the tones. Here we go. Where are we here? I'll bring the tones up in here. Like, there we go. Right away. Now you're starting to get almost like a gray. And the cypress would have a little bit of dark on the one side. We'll have some shadow behind the statue here, so we'll pop that in there. And let's see, we can put a little bit more sap green to get some darker green in there too, and allow the moisture just to pop around and get some, rather than just seeing all those lines that I have from my drawing, we can get some real fun feeling for the bushes and stuff and the trees behind. We can even use a little bit of spray to make that activated and to soften it up a bit. Let's get some color in here. Now at the time that the picture was taken, it was just quite dry and not a lot of activity going on. So let's just see what I can bring up here and see if we want to add some color into the... so you can see there's really nothing for foliage here. There may be a bit of some kind of, even looks like could have been some pond or something. But you know what? Why don't we bring in a little bit of this red-yellow color, because that way we get a little bit of balance so that we see a little bit of different combination of color in here. So we're just going to pop some of the color from the column into some of this area to give it an idea that there was some flowers in here. We can drop in a little bit more yellow, or we can go back to the permanent rose and pop up some color in there. Just make it a little more alive. And then it's always great when you can have it a little bit more of a triangle. So let's drop in a complementary color, which is red against the green, and we'll just pop it into some of this shadow area, and that'll pull that together. Great. Okay, so we want a bit of a warm gray, and if we take our PERYLENE green and add a little bit of yellow, what happens? We get a very olivey green. Now if we add in the red to that, we now get a bit of a brown that I was mentioning, and if I added a bit more red and yellow, I would get definitely a darker brown. Let's just keep mixing them around here. That's a nice brown. Why don't we add that while we've got it into our tree? Now the sun was coming from the right, so I could certainly leave the right a little bit lighter. I can just add some water and loosen up my darks. And on the left, I could add a little bit more of the PERYLENE green to get some of those shadows in there too. Shadows underneath some of the greens that were climbing up the tree. Now I find that the green is a bit dull in that area, so why don't we add a little bit more of a brighter, vibrant green. We can add a little bit of the sap green. We can even add a little bit more phthalo blue to just pop it in a bit. Here we go. And the phthalo will just add some cooler tones to the colors that are already there. And we can pop in a little bit more into the back here. Let that all mingle together. And the couple we could leave white. We could color up. It's up to you. There we go. So now let's focus on a little bit of a depiction of our statue. Now I have this completed as brown, right? If I bring some more of my PERYLENE green in here, now I have a bit of a grayish brown. If I bring a little bit more, my gray gets even stronger. If I bring back some yellow, now my gray is a little bit more yellow toned. So I think I'm going to work with that. I'm going to water it down a bit and test it out. Let's find a scrap piece of paper to test it out. It's always good to have a scrap piece of paper around just to try it out and see how your color is going to look. Okay, now she has some shadow on the back right in here. And I'm just going to pop that all the way down along the back of the statue, and it comes right down into the back behind the archway. It's quite dark behind here actually. And there's some dark around here and just by her foot too. Now that same dark color kind of gets put on more like algae, and I'm going to dry brush that around her arm at the front here. And then up here on her head it's quite dark. Just maybe from the angle. So we're just going to pop that in. And I'm going to soften that up with some water so that I can get a little bit of softer, now that's a bit too dry, softer color down here, because it's not actually white. It does actually have some. Now if I find that that's still too dark, remember it will lighten up, but I can always lighten it up with a little bit of just dabbing. Let's put a little bit of shadow in here, as I see it there as well. And even up on the back of her neck, there's a bit of shadow. We can do her whole face a little bit to get rid of that green in her face, and then just lift. And now we've got that bit of shadow that she's showing up on. Okay, so we have to get a little darker in the back here, and all I need to do is add some of the dark PERYLENE green to get a little bit of that dark in there. So let's pop that in, and pop that back here as well. And then at the very base, I said it was quite dark at the very base back here. So just dry brushing it in here. Hopefully you can see. Because normally what I do is I raise the camera a bit more so that you can see the entire picture, and I missed out on that when I saw that you don't see the sky there. Okay. So I'm just going to now add a little bit with my dagger. I'm going to activate the PERYLENE green so it's quite dark, and I'm going to just add a little bit of extra color into some of these areas where I see some of the dust has settled into the statue. Now I mentioned about the hair, there was a bit more dust kind of sitting in there and around the edge of the bun here. Even her ear a little bit, but I'm not going to worry about that. What else have we got? In here and some of the folds in here. And it was definitely, like I said, darker in this back area. More down on this end. So let's just pop a little bit more of the darks in here. Because you do need to have the tones, you need some really good dark tones to offset and give some good color to the painting. So I've done that. Now what I'm going to do is go into a darker regular gray by adding a little bit more of the PERYLENE green to that coloring. And I should be able to see by just touching, that's a bit dark. I need a little bit of blue, I think, into the mix. And then I should get more of that kind of color that I'm looking for. I mean, that's still a little too greenish. Let's see here, add a little bit more red. Aha. Okay, so let's try this. I'm just going to water this down a bit, put it over here, and let's see if we can get some of this nice marble going across here. Now what I could do, just lift some of this up eventually. I'm just going to, there's a nice, it's quite shadowed over here, so let's finish this square here. And lift some of this color here and bring it in as the shadow that comes across. And it comes across this way too, and then lightens up. So let me just take my brush and now just with the water that I have, just lighten everything up. And we'll lighten this up now too. And I think I just missed the steps, maybe not. This should have come down here. So what I'm going to do is just going to quickly fix that up. How to do that? Just by lifting. So there is some marble patterning in there, so we can make that happen in just a second. There is another way to lift too if I was having a really bad addition of color, but let's try and fix this just like doing that. Okay, oh, we've got that the wrong one too, so we got to fix it all up. All right. We'll take it and we'll just add a little bit of texture color to the whole thing, and now fix up which blocks are supposed to be the correct color. And that should be the same color there, then this one, then this one. Bring in a little bit more color now that everything's a little bit damper. This one, that one, and keep following it along. So now we can add the color into here, into this one, and keep going with that. And now come back over here and start the process again. And once this is a little bit drier, I can take the tip of the brush and make a little bit of marbling technique in here. I could use a white gel pen as well, because in some of these shadowed areas with the darker coloring, there is some white in there, whereas on the other way it's a little bit of dark. And I'm not trying to be exact here, I just want to show you the process and keep our time short, just so that you get an idea of what we do. All right. Bringing my picture back up, I'm just going to check out. Aha, there's some nice shadow in here. So we're just going to take a little bit more of that coloring, and I happen to have a little bit more of the red added into it just to get it almost like a purple. And I'm just going to add, so this tree must be giving some shadow over this area. And the shadow comes down over here too, but it doesn't quite actually get on the marble here. But you do see some shadows in here as well. So I'll just add a little bit of shadow coming down on around there. We'll add a little bit of shadow back in here that we had already put in, but we'll just add a little bit more. Now there's some area in here that was a specific kind of statue area, so I'm just going to darken that with this purple. And add a little bit of dark into this area and bring it over to the side here. And I think we'll just leave the people as they are. I'll put a little shadow in here. Okay, so now that we've got a little bit of that purple, we'll bring that purple down at the base because we want to add that shadow in there. And we want to try and add some of that color distinction and have it flow a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to add a little water and let that soften out there. Perfect. Now these are the stairs. There was a little bit of shadow on the stairs on this side here, not as quite as dark as behind the statue. And we can put a little bit more of that there. I could even bring some of this purple into the base here to get that dark. And maybe even bring it up a little bit out here. Oh, and there was a bit of shadow there. So I'm just looking to see if there's any other shadow anywhere else that I need. And I think we're good. Just pop a little darker in there. Now, as far as the shadows that we put onto the statue, those are looking pretty good. Add a little bit more to some of the folds in here. A little bit more of that dry brushing around this area of the arm. Okay, and we could add just a wee bit more of that dark into our tree area so they're not as in the base here, because it was quite dark in the base behind this statue. That's behind there. Let's drop that in there. Now we don't want it right around the statue because then we lose the statue too, so we're just trying here and there a little bit of dark. A little bit more on the maybe the cypress tree. Let's just get some. And I see this little bit of dark that I put in here is just a little bit more than I wanted, so I'm just softening it up with water. Okay. The only other thing I see is some shadow in there, so I'm just going to go back to the colors that I had and pop in a bit of shadow onto the column here. And I'm just going to soften that up. Mix it in a bit with sky that I have there so that we don't see that blossom that you're seeing right now. Just have to soften that up and that will go away as a watermark. And we can always add a little bit more blue if we felt it was necessary, or we could leave it like it was cloud. Okay. And I'm just trying to see if I'm missing anything else here. We could put a little bit of shadow on the people. That's what we could do. I'm just looking. Her shadow would be in just in the back here. Back of her hair and hat. Down the back of her shirt for him. He was almost completely in the shadow, so let's just cover him almost that way. Perfect. Okay. And is there anything else we need? There was a bit more dark here. Dark around her foot, actually. Dark up in this area of the shirt, the dress, and just a little connecting there. Let's see if there's anything else with her neck. Not a lot. Under her face, this part could be a little darker on the top of the head, so we'll add just a bit more dark in here. All right, and there we have it. There's our loose image from Corfu. So thank you very much for watching this process with me so that you can have a chance to see a little bit of how you go through the process of trying out this. If you're interested, I can email you the template and the write-up for this picture, and you're welcome to email me and I will send you this information. Thanks for watching.